tell the audience about how you got started in real estate. All right, Chris Hatch, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you've got a huge Twitter presence, all drive-thrus. Want to talk a little bit more about the origins of your career, so the brokerage, then transitioning to the development side. So let's talk about how you got started.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm a third-generation commercial real estate owner, all here out of the Salt Lake area. And I started my career in 2002. I was still going to the University of Utah for my undergrad at the time, and knew I wanted to be a commercial real estate owner and developer. And so I sat down with my dad, who was a pretty small-scale Albertsons developer. He'd done a handful of Albertsons grocery, anchored ground-up development deals throughout the Intermountain States. And so I told him, hey, I want to be an owner. I want to be a developer. And he said, perfect. You can go be an attorney, contractor, title, broker, or lender. And I was like, oof. Not sure I want to do any of those things.
I think you'd be a great lawyer, personally.
I was like, title sounds so boring. And, some of those were just like, whoa, I don't know about that. So I said, no, I want to be an owner. And he's like, right, you need to do this for 10 to 20 years. And you need to watch all these various other people lose money, make money. You need to see everything. And that's what's nice about the role that you would play if you chose any of those 5 paths. Is you'd have the opportunity to see a lot of different people do things. And you'd see what they do right, and you'd see what they do wrong, and then you can decide what works best for yourself. And so we ultimately decided that contractor and broker sounded the most entertaining. And so then it boiled down to finding a mentor, which is critical, in the early stages of anybody's career. And we found a great mentor on the brokerage side, and there you go. So I jumped in.
Yeah. How did your dad and your grandpa, how did they get started?
My grandfather was an oil and gas landman, and when he was putting minerals together, he would often keep an overriding royalty. And so we have a lot of minerals that he bought in the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s. He bought all the way up till the age 100. So he bought it up until 8-9 years ago.
We can cut this part out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I usually have a checklist, but we got talking. But it's all good.
So Grandpa was an oil and gas landman, and he spent his days putting together mineral tracts, and he did that in the middle of production areas. And so he would often keep an overriding royalty on minerals that he put together, and then he'd lease them or sell them to production companies. And so he did that for a long time. It's where he got his start. Once he started making a little bit of money, he wanted to diversify. And so he had a great working relationship with Texaco, and so he started doing open book build-to-suits for Texaco at 9% rate of returns back in the early 70s.
Back in the good old days.
That's right. Yeah. Positive leverage days,
yes. Which,
unheard of in the terms of 2023 today. So he started doing 9% open book build-to-suit deals for Texaco. The downer with those leases is the Texaco would then put a franchisee into the gas station, and they insisted that there be a put purchase right. And so over time, the operators of the gas stations bought every single one of those. So a good example of that is the 5 acres that there was a Texaco on 5 acres in Draper on 123rd South.
I was just there today.
South side of the road, southeast corner of 123rd and I-15, kind of where Cafe Rio's originally was in there,
yeah.
Carl's Jr. And so that whole site was purchased in like 1991 for like $100,000. So
worth a little bit more today.
Yeah, right. Yes. I was going to say the land alone is probably $7-8 million. Yeah.
Yeah, typical brokers, it's not worth that much.
So he did that, and then the first asset he moved over with no purchase right in was the Arby's that he developed on 4 South, 4th East in Salt Lake City, and he acquired all that property in the fall of 1976, and then developed an Arby's restaurant in the spring of 1977 there.
And now you're going to bulldoze the Arby's and build some housing?
Yeah, that's truly a fun one. My dad also had a geology degree, and he was doing that, and then he quit in the 80s. He was over in Denver working for Amoco, and he quit before he got laid off because big layoff waves went through in the mid-'80s there in the oil and gas business. And then he came home and went to work at the only commercial real estate brokerage shop that had a training program, which was Coldwell Banker, and got through the training program and then called his best friend from Amoco, who had gone home to his hometown in Bentonville, Arkansas, and of course went to work for Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
And he convinced him and said, hey, I'm going to open up, I'm going to broker a couple of Walmart deals for you. And his buddy said, you have no idea what you're doing. And he said, no, I'm going to figure it out. We're going to do this. And he went on to broker 15 Walmart deals for them. So it was a really good relationship for him. Not everybody starts not everybody starts their brokerage career representing Walmart. So that was a good one.
My first commercial lease assignment was a dog groomer. So basically sixes.
Yeah, right. Same thing. So he did that. But the reason I mentioned that is because with the Arby's restaurant there in Salt Lake, Grandpa built it, and then my dad renewed it in the late 90s when the lease came up, and Arby's was ready for a refresh. And that was right during the time period where we had our mayor and the city council had started pushing a new urbanism, and so they wanted no drive-thrus wrapping around buildings. They wanted kind of walkable storefronts, which is nearly impossible to deliver for fast food restaurants. And so they remodeled it and more or less were planning to keep a wall. And then they ultimately had to scrap that plan and decide, okay, let's gut it and redo it. And in the process of doing that, the building burned almost down to the ground. And so they ended up going back to the plan of keeping one wall and then redoing it. So Grandpa built it. My dad renewed it in the late 90s. And then I took it through 2022. December 2022, they closed their doors. And now we have a plan that we're going to push through and do a HUD loan and build 237 apartments.
I think that's a great example. You get asked all the time on Twitter, why would I buy triple net assets when I can just buy treasuries? Yeah. Can't bulldoze treasuries.
No. And you look at the lift on that. Well, Grandpa bought that ground in the 70s. I've tried to find a number of times the records for what he actually paid for that site, and I've had a heck of a time trying to figure that out. We think he paid $50,000 for the acre there of land that we have. I do know he told me a number of times he could have bought the entire block for $500,000, which would have been a 7-acre tract, which would have been amazing, by the way. Land down there these days is more or less worth about $200 to $300 a land foot, depending on your configuration.
Yeah.
So, yeah, picking it up in that price range would have been a bargain. So
it would have been nice. And if the IRS is asking, you bought it for $200, right?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing, but his deal presumably got done at a similar rate of return, like a 9, that it was back in the day. And then you look at what's happened over time, that land has gone up tremendously in value. And here we are working on a HUD loan, which is great because we're going to, put the capital in needed to get that project going. And we'll lock it up for 40 more years, and it'll be my kid's problem.
What do you think your kid's going to bulldoze in that?
No clue.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Yeah. Okay, so getting back, so you started off in the brokerage world with a great mentor. How'd you get started in that?
Yeah, it was an interesting program. They were brokers and they were developers, and so they had a number of clients that they wanted to build for, and they, had pitched, let's broker and develop for you. And so to get a little bit more separation, they had me kind of running the brokerage efforts, which was an entertaining way to start because, I was a rookie, 1 year in the biz, 2 year in the biz, and I would be driving a team full of 14 people from Dollar Tree, or 12 people from Starbucks or whatever it was, team of 15, bankers from Wells Fargo, everybody wearing suits. And I'm driving around in this 15 passenger vans and, they're asking questions, honestly, faster than you can even answer them. And it's exhausting. Right. And so that was really my first 3 years in the biz. Was every day it felt like I had a new tenant tour or something new, going to look at new sites. It's just a lot of windshield time.
Yeah. And how long was it Coldwell Banker the whole time, or when did they merge? Was it early 2010s or so?
So I started at a boutique firm here called Professional Brokers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that's where I worked there for 3 years. And then I flipped out of there, went to General Growth with the development team for a year, and then went back into the brokerage side with our boutique. And then we founded, first boutique, and then we opened our most recent office 7 years ago with Legend Partners.
Love Legend Partners. I actually, I have an article that talks about why Tanner Olson is such a great broker. Like that guy on our project in Smithfield, every time I ask him about a tenant, he's like, yeah, I talked to them like 8 months ago. So he's just a step ahead. Okay. So let's talk. First deal you did with Legends was the iconic Astra Tower.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, that was a fun one. We had a client from Boston, KIC, and Ed Lewis was the point contact for us with the family. Ed's a tremendous person, and he had moved out from Boston and was living in Park City. And the reason what brought him out here is he was actually running a snow and skiboarding app that kind of recorded your movements as you made downhill movement over the mountain, during the day.
I could use that.
Sure. Yeah. Right. And there's a handful of those that have come up. When he developed his app, it was pretty new technology to have that on your phone. And so that's what brought him out west here. They owned several dozen towers in downtown Boston. And so when we first started meeting with Ed and Zach Wright, who was his, Zach more or less was his project manager to get Astra Tower moving and get the project going. And Zach kept telling us, hey, I think these folks really want to do this, and they want to make a big impact and a big splash, and they want to build a nice building. And we started doing some homework on who the family was, and they looked very qualified and capable. And so, we went to work, and we just started looking through where can we put this, right? Where can we put the tallest building in Utah and the most, high-end apartment housing we're going to have? What makes sense? And it's really interesting. It was intimidating at first to go find that D1 zoning piece. At that point, I had actually never helped anybody acquire a D1 piece of land. And so kind of foreign subject for us. What was interesting, though, is when we pulled that out and started looking at every piece of land in our downtown zoning that had D1 zoning classification to it, which is our tallest height, what we noticed is about 50 to 60% of it has retail underneath. And so once we boiled it down to that, it became much easier because you started looking at it and you're like, wait, we know these owners. I know all these people.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what ended up happening. We ultimately found a piece of ground, and we knew that this particular client had some capital needs for some other projects going on. And so we approached them and just said, would you consider an offer if you got to a range you needed, that you were interested in? And it was a fit. And so it just happened to just get lucky, right place, right time, hunted smart, we were able to put that together.
That's interesting. I had always thought that you got the listing and Kensington came along afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Legends, like why you decided to open up your own shop and what you guys are up to.
Yeah,
there.
You bet. So we opened the Legend Partners Salt Lake City office here 7 years ago, and it's been a great fit for us. At the time we opened up the shop, we were sitting at a different boutique that I had co-founded. We had a property management team. I was doing some development work, which is primarily rehabbing strip malls. We'd rip the front off. A lot of that stuff where you see like the sloped terracotta tile for the front, for the facades, taking that kind of stuff off, putting in better sign bands, just pretty normal, middle of the road kind of stuff for value add. And so we were running some of those programs at our other shop, and it wasn't as good of a fit. So we kind of need to be in a little more control of our destiny. And so we created Legend Partners and opened the office here. And we were able to, keep our management efforts going. Our management company has since grown to about 5.5 million feet of management. We have 130 clients. There are 750 tenants that we have to track monthly, which is just a joy for those folks to track.
Including the mobile home parks?
That's right. Yeah, we have 2 mobile home parks, yes. So, which are just a highlight of our office, no doubt. Yeah. Legend has 18 agents. We have 2 folks that do land brokerage. We have 2 that are investment sales, and then the remainder 14 are all more or less landlord or tenant rep on the leasing side in retail.
How is it? You're wearing a lot of hats right now with the brokerage team, the property management team, and doing your own development. How do you kind of divvy up those responsibilities? Because Chris can't do all of that, obviously.
Yeah, it helps if you're like schizophrenic, right? Or you have multiple personalities. That helps.
Voices have their own responsibilities.
That's right. You got to keep the voices a little quiet, depending on your environment. I see it, there's 34 people in our office, and the way I see it is each person I get to share 1/34 of my brain with. And so what's fun about that is that I might sit down, with Chloe, and we're working on a specific tenant rep leasing assignment. And then 5 minutes later, I can sit down with Tess and we can look at a vacant space in, the Lee's Market Shopping Center in North Salt Lake. And we can talk about potential tenants that might go in there for the client that we're working for there. And 5 minutes after that, I walk over and go talk to Brent Malili, who runs our development team.
A beast. Brent is a beast.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can go sit down with Brent and say, Brent, where are we at on this loan? What's happening here? How are we doing on entitlements? When are we up for planning commission? And he can give me the rundown start to finish. And then I leave there, go walk over and talk to Porter, and we can run through every pro forma we've got. He's forgotten more about pro formas at his young age than I've ever learned. And so, yeah, it's truly amazing. We have a team that is unparalleled. They're top of class, each one, and it's really amazing. I've never been around so much talent ever.
Yeah, that from my experience with Legends, it's obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also worked for a broker / developer, and one of the struggles that I had when I would go pitch other clients is, well, this deal's great, but why didn't your boss buy it? Mm-hmm. How do you handle that objection?
Yeah. Is a lot of the existing stuff, we're just not really focused on buying it. Is what works for you is a lot of it. So for example, if a $40 million shopping center comes up, I'm not the buyer for that, right? That's not what I'm doing for a living at the moment. We're primarily building ground up retail, and that's usually one-off, single tenant. Maybe occasionally we'll do a 3 or 4 pad deal. Sometimes we'll do a 3 or 4 tenant building if the situation is correct for that kind of product. But for the most part, it's really, it's a lot of what just fits. I actually was under the impression that we would have a lot of perceived competition from other ground up development shops, and that would be the area where, to your point, right, where we might run into some issues. And it's kind of been interesting. It's actually kind of exactly the opposite, because we have a ground up development team going and running. The ground up developers that are in the market are often seeking us out. And part of the reason they're doing that is because within their own business plans, they're typically having problems locating sites that are appropriate fits for the clients that they're working with, whom are different than the clients that I'm working with, right? And so usually, we have a great ability to go locate sites. That is one of our strengths at Legend Partners, is being able to locate something when nobody else can. Typically, when I'm working with a new customer, like if you were, the next fast food that was coming, to town, let's say you were Sharky's Tacos or something else that's not here, but looking.
Are they coming?
They've been looking. Yeah.
Good. Good enough. Well, insider secret for
there you go. That's right. We'll just drop it here. Drop all the hot details come out here on the cast. But if you're the new brand, I don't ask you for, tell me what works and is an easy deal. I start every conversation with, where is the number one problem you have? Where is the area where you cannot figure out a site? Because I always figure if I can solve that for the client, I'll have a client for life.
What are some of those problems that Sharkies, they come to town? What are some of the issues that they might run into, whether it's access, labor, building size, building availability, labor availability? Like, what are those issues that they run into?
It usually has to do with available real estate, right? Here in Utah, we have large family sizes. Our real estate is controlled, similar to lots of other locations in America. Our real estate is controlled by a very small amount of people in relation to what the total population is. Our problem, I believe, is further complicated in Utah because most are family offices. And so most folks just don't have an interest in selling any of their properties. And rather than sell them, they're going to give them to their kids, right? Or their grandkids. And so that artificially creates more.
I would never, by the way.
Yeah. There you go. Have kids or give it away. Give it to
We'll see.
You never say never, Tanner.
Yeah.
No, but it's artificially creates more of a problem for us because we have a very hard time finding available real estate to buy and rehab and do different things with. And so it kind of creates its own problem there, but it's usually just, I can't find a site in this trade area. I'd really like to be on this corridor in this area, and I can't figure out anything to go.
Okay, so kind of switching to the developer side of this.
Yeah.
What is the exact deal? Like, if I said, Chris, you can have any deal in the world, what would it be? Like, what size of drive-through? What tenant?
I am doing my very first in and out deal I've never done one as a broker, and this is the first one I'm doing as a developer, and we're brokering it, and it is phenomenal. I'm having so much fun. We're not totally done with the approval processes. We're getting close, but I am ecstatic. I can't hardly wait. I would go do 100 more in and outs. They are the nicest people to work with. It's a private company. They don't have any debt. They're very, they're very easy to work with.
And they make delicious food.
And the food, the product is unbelievable. Yes.
Okay. So when you're out touring as a developer, like you're looking in Denver or by the way, where are you looking these days?
In terms of active projects, we just wrapped up a Dutch Bros in Post Falls, Idaho. We are finishing building a Town Place Suites in Coeur d'Alene, so kind of that north panhandle of Idaho. We did a couple of Mexican fast food deals. We converted old KFCs on in the Seattle area last year. We are actively working on several projects in Wyoming right now. I did one Starbucks in Montana last year in Livingston, just east of Bozeman. We have projects kind of going north to south in the state of Utah, so all the way up north, up into Logan, and then we own 4 acres up there that we're developing. And then that ranges all the way down into St. George, down in the Red Rock country. We have a couple of projects that we are looking at in Phoenix at the moment, a couple in Vegas, and then we have a Dutch Bros that we're going to do in Allen, Texas.
Okay, so, I mean, those are lots of different locations that have their own challenges. So how do you maintain, like I had a guy a long time ago tell me, as soon as you leave kind of your 10-mile radius of your hometown, you become, or you have the potential to become that out-of-town idiot. So what are some of the key features of, each specific tenant that you make sure that you avoid becoming that out-of-town idiot?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you notice some of those product types, I mentioned the hotel there we're working on in Coeur d'Alene. I say a hotel, we help select that site for one of our partners who really is the GP there and is running the whole project. We're very passive and very quiet. We're not doing any active day-to-day details. We found the site. We have 2 housing projects under construction. Both of those, we are a passive partner in the GP group, but a passive member of that GP group. We did the site selection. Somebody else is doing all the blocking and tackling for putting everything else together day to day. So outside of our backyard, we don't break from our asset class, our core asset class, which is retail. So for me, if I'm building a Dutch Bros in Allen, Texas, or I'm building a Dutch Bros in Post Falls, Idaho, or in Midwest in Ohio or Indiana or somewhere else, doesn't really make a difference. It's the same building, right? That more or less that I'm building. My site selection process is the same. I can typically look at a property and tell kind of how it's going to flow and lay out. I generally know how Dutch Bros is going to view the property. I know what their drivers are. I know what their triggers are. I know what does and does not work for them. And so it's really not that different. And I hear your point, though. You got to always be careful and cognizant, that you don't do something you shouldn't do. This is where the role, and I talk about this on Twitter all the time, the role of the leasing brokers is the most underpaid and absolutely over-deliver, responsibility in the entire commercial real estate process. There's nobody that is paid less for what they do than the leasing brokers.
100% with you on that.
A good leasing broker is not going to allow you to be, the out-of-towner that bought something that nobody else wanted to buy locally. They're just not going to stand by and let you do that, right? And it's the way most good leasing brokers are wired.
Cool. All right. So, and on that same note, what do you look at when you look at a site? How do you know if it's a Dutch Bros site, Starbucks site, some other boutique coffee shop? Who do you send it to first? How does that even work?
It's a great question. It depends on what I'm looking for. A lot of the time we're looking for something specific in a trade area. We will often do portfolio reviews with our clients, the retailers that we're working for, and we'll sit down, and sometimes it's with the retailer themselves. Other times it's with their broker. And we'll talk about which stores are working, of your most recent, last couple of years of openings, which ones have been a flop, which ones have been good, which ones have been even. What would you do differently? Why do you think this one did better? Why do you think that one did worse? So we'll spend a lot of time asking questions like that. And then we'll spend at least half the time talking about where you'd like to go next. And so we usually arrive at an intersection, and we already have tenants in mind that we're going for. And then it does help a lot, by the way. I mean, if you're looking for a Starbucks drive-through site, you got to be on the AM side of the road. And when I started my career, 2002, I was a Starbucks tenant rep broker. I sat on every corner in Salt Lake County. That was a lit intersection on the AM side of the road and counted cars in the morning time. And that's how you figure out where the AM side of the road is. And it's no different, now if I'm wondering what side is the AM, well, I just go sit there in the morning or the evening. Obviously, the evening traffic pattern is opposite, so you just watch for that. But, we usually know when we arrive at a location.
On that note, I want to bring up, you said that you've toured, I can't remember what restaurant it was, but every single one in the state of Idaho.
Oh boy. Yeah. So one of my friends bought all the Wendy's. He bought the franchisee out of Ada County and Canyon County, which is Boise all the way over to Nampa and Caldwell. So the whole kind of Treasure Valley, Boise area. So they bought all the Wendy's out. And at the time, we had 11 Wendy's that were open. And so the Wendy's corporate person said, look, to really come up with the best growth plan, we have kind of a roadmap for how to do this. And so I need a commitment out of everybody that we're going to do this. And my operator said, look, I need you to get in the car and do this with us. So the exercise was to go through every single restaurant, every single fast food burger restaurant in the greater Boise area over a 4-day period. And because there were, my operator and 3 people from corporate, I was dubbed to be in the back of the minivan for 4 straight days, which was just lovely, by the way. It's really good on your knees after day 2. Yeah. It's really feeling amazing. But what we did over 4 days is we went inside every single Jack in the Box, McDonald's, Burger King, Carl's Jr., Wendy's, all of them. We graded the restrooms, what the quality of the fixtures were, how clean the restrooms were. There was like a 3-page scorecard for each restaurant, and we did that for every single restaurant in Boise.
The European mind could just never comprehend.
I can tell you, if you're ever in Boise and you need to use a restroom and you need a few minutes, just text me. I probably have a good, available option.
If my brother lives in Boise, so hopefully he's listening.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So going back a little bit, you're in some hotels, you're in some apartments, retail, basically everything. And you mentioned you have some partners with it. How'd you get those partnerships? What do those relationships look like? And just talk about the partnerships for a little bit.
Sure. One of the benefits of having the opportunity to go into brokerage and view so many other people's business plans and how they operate, back to the point my dad was trying to push me towards, it's given me the opportunity to watch what I feel like a lot of people do really well and other people's do less well, and et cetera. And just over time, there's been some opportunity for us to have discussion with clients of the firm. They all started as clients, where it was just, hey, look, what would you think about on our next, site that we put in front of you if we're your partner? And it's just kind of a natural, organic conversation. And I found, when you're in that role, as a broker, we never really approached anything just as a leasing broker. We never really approached anything just as a land purchasing broker or a back-end investment sale broker. I always kind of approached it as all of those things, and also asset management and a little bit development minded. And so I'm a pretty hands-on person. And so a lot of my clients recognize that very quickly, right? And see that trait. And so as I've had conversations, there's been a few instances in which it just was good alignment with the clients where they said, look, that sounds tremendous to us. We'd be happy to have you on as a partner, and let's go get to work and let's go work on some stuff. And so it was just as organic as that. And then we did our job, our normal job, and we went and found a site.
This is kind of a springing this question on you, but what do, you mentioned some of the good developers do one thing and the, not as good developers do another thing. What are some of the common traits that you see from the good developers?
Great. A good retail developer pays their leasing broker the fastest. That's the first bill you pay always. And I cannot reiterate that message enough. Leasing brokers are underpaid in retail. The faster you pay that retail broker, the faster you tell them thank you, the more opportunities you will see. Typically, the ones that I see that do the best have tremendous relationships with their leasing brokers because their leasing brokers supply their whole pipeline.
Let's talk a little bit more about working with brokers in general, just because you've obviously seen both sides of it. And I'd share the same sentiment. I think most, the good brokers are the most underpaid, not only leasing, but investment sales as well. Mm-hmm. A good broker is worth its weight in gold 2 times, 3 times over.
Yeah.
So let's say you're a new developer and you want to get great relationships with brokers outside of paying them the quickest. How else do you get those great relationships?
You need to be attentive. You got to do your job. When an LOI comes in, you turn it quickly, right? It's no problem if you have questions and you go back to your broker and say, can you answer these couple of questions for me? But you definitely need to just do your basic job. It's frequent. I mean, even to this day, all the time, I sit there and, I'll have one of our leasing folks come in and review something with me, and they'll ask my opinion of how I think I can move forward, or what I have as a recommendation for them to move forward because they can't get their client to respond on something. Just doing your basic job is important, and it sounds mundane. It sounds like, kind of matter of fact or Captain Obvious, but doing your job is critical. You have to do your job. You have to be the developer. Putting everything that you're seeing in front of your leasing broker. Most leasing brokers are never going to violate, if somebody else has brought you in a deal. Let's just say there's somebody out digging up land and they brought you a new opportunity to buy. Maybe it's near your Smithfield deal, right, that you're developing up there, north side of Logan. And let's say some other broker brought you a deal in Logan. Just you going back and sitting down with Tanner Olson and saying, hey, Tanner, just FYI, somebody else brought me this deal. What do you think of it, right? And that other person's not likely a leasing broker. Typically, that's what ends up happening. And so you're just having a conversation and just staying in good communication with your broker. You're being clear about what's happening. They know. You don't want any surprises with those folks. They don't really deal well with surprises.
Yeah.
You just kind of are forthright with them and do your job. I mean, that's the critical part.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Want to talk about specifically what you're up to today. You've got a bunch of apartments, a bunch of retail. How do you think about, 1, the market that we're in, 2, how you kind of capitalize these deals, whether they're all for rent or all, plan to sell? Let's just go over what you're up to today. And, if the audience wants to invest with you, kind of how you think about investing.
Yeah. So the market has been interesting where we haven't been able to create positive leverage for a while. And that problem became significantly further compounded, year and a half ago when the Fed started raising rates. But really, that had already existed for a couple of years, right? I mean, it wasn't, folks like you or I weren't able to go out and buy existing assets and put leverage on them and return greater than what the cap rate was. So it's been a challenging environment for a while here. We have been able to find some solace, you and I have, in ground up, which has been nice. A lot of our ground up from last year went from having nice, fat, juicy margins to having no margin by the time they were getting completed, which was an interesting experience. We were fortunate with our project book. We had a few that we, wrote smaller checks in and just cashed in and permed them. And so on a cash in perm, moving off the construction loans. And then we had a few that we just exited at, basis or a small gain. It wasn't much, nothing to write home about. And so it was good to kind of cycle those bad deals out as quickly as we could. We got all of that off of our table, and I have one more refinance to complete. It's already committed, but I have to finish off the loan. But once that's done, I'll have everything off the table from last year. We have reset the hopper for next year, and we've moved our margins up. It's been very strenuous, I would say, between us and the tenants. And not that we have a bad relationship with the tenants. It's been challenging for the tenants to understand what's happened with margins and how their rents have moved up even further than what they had already moved up, because we had all those material, like post-COVID material increases, pushed everything up. And all of a sudden, easiest tenants related to is I built a Starbucks in North Ogden 4 years ago, and our rent was like $109,000. My most recent deals I'm looking at with Starbucks right now are all in the high 100s, 180 to 200,000 range on rent. Almost double.
Are they just going to make way more money from that new store, or how do you justify that as a tenant?
it's a challenge, right? Their sales have gone up. COVID caused almost all food, convenience food, to go up in average ticket pricing, which is good for them. They have the exact same challenges in labor that you and I have to deal with, which is what's causing our costs to be more expensive still, is labor. And so they've got the same issues that we're dealing with. But so they are making more money, and they can always afford to pay 6 to 8%, of their total sales in rent. And so as their sales go up, they can pay more in rent, and inflation has caused their pricing to go up as well. And so the quarter pounders cost more at McDonald's, right? Or you're getting less quarter pounders, one or the other.
Yeah.
Pretty easy math equation to solve. So that's all happening. And then, simultaneous to that, you're sitting there saying, hey, smiling, hey, by the way, your rent's up 80%, and it's just a challenge, right? And so on almost every deal we've sent off in the last 12 months, it's usually, here's the site, here's our full pitch deck, and here's our pro forma. You need to see what our margin is. And what's also been interesting is the back end side of that, because everything's valued off of an exit value. Now, our exit might be a perm loan, but one way or another, we have to come up with what we think the cap rate is at the time we're done with the project. And so that's been a challenge, because a lot of the retailers, until about 2 or 3 months ago, didn't necessarily agree with us that their Starbucks wasn't going to sell at X cap rate.
Really?
Yeah, right.
Huh.
So just it was a challenge. Their cap rates were moving up so rapidly that, you could see it if you were watching the investment sales stuff and all of the new availables that were coming to market. And there have been several very smart investment brokers out there that started tracking specifically some tenants, watching what was happening with the cap rate, watching what was happening with, total available inventory on the market. And those that were early adopters are being rewarded for those efforts that they put forward, because they're looking like experts in the field at the moment. And we just kept turning our retailers back to some of those investment brokers and saying, look, if the end value is here today, it's not likely to be lower, while we got Jerome Powell, on record stating he's going to continue to raise rates. It is not going the right direction for you.
Yeah.
Or us, by the way. It's a combined effort. It's a team effort. And so, we've got to build more margin in here, or we got to look at a better, exit cap.
So how is that? I've never done a build to suit. How does that work between you and the tenant? Are you saying, we need to build to this, we need to build to call it a 7 cap or an 8 cap or whatever, because we think we can sell it at a 6? And how are they comfortable with do they try and make you take less margin, or how does that really work?
Yeah, that's the game. You just define the game. So, and most tenants are really pretty straightforward about how to work through it. But yes, you're building to an unlevered yield on cost that in today's marketplace is more or less between 7.25% and 9%, depending on the tenant, depending on the credit, depending on the deal structure, depending on a variety of things. But most developers that are moving forward with projects in the U.S. right now are moving forward on retail, are moving forward 7.25% to 9% unlevered. Now, they're doing that because they think their exit is somewhere between a 6 and a 7, right? So it's usually 150 to 200 basis points of spread. And depending on the market, can be as high as 250 to 300 basis points of spread. There are a lot of developers right now that are just saying, look, if I can't get to a 10, I'm not moving forward. Well, that translates at the moment to most of those folks are not very busy right now.
Yeah. Okay. And if someone does want to invest with you, how do they find out about you?
We do have investors that work with us periodically. Obviously, we're seeking for accredited investors out there. To determine if people are a good fit in investing with us, you can hit the link right on our website, nNNincome.com. And then right at the top, there's a banner.
That's awesome. I didn't know you had that handle.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Triple Net Income.
Yeah.
We're just passive cash flow guys. I mean, that's how we think of most things, right?
So who are you a good fit for? Is it, family offices, insurance, pension funds, all the above, just tailoring strategies, or?
Yeah, I think so. We always are a good fit for family offices. That's usually our best fit. We like second and third generational families. When they're looking to, if they have exposure in multifamily or industrial, or they're heavy in some of those sectors, we offer them a retail outlet. We are raising a fair amount of money for the multifamily efforts that we're doing. We've got about 2,000 doors, that are in the construction pipeline or in design pipeline. And so we have a fair amount of that that's coming through. And so it's just a good opportunity for family offices that are just looking to diversify into different buckets.
Cool. Well, Chris, this has been awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yep.